No one expected the silence of the Korean hills to be broken that night. The snow fell in heavy sheets, muffling every sound, as if the land itself wanted to bury the truth of what was about to happen. But deep in the darkness, a small group of soldiers, cold, exhausted, and far from home, would soon find themselves at the center of a battle that history nearly forgot. Among them was a young Turkish private named Mehmet Kara, whose quiet courage would be tested in ways no training could have prepared him for. This was not just another clash of armies. It was survival. It was sacrifice. And for Mehmet, it became the story he never intended to write, but one that would live on in the pages of his journal. Yet what he didn't know, as the frost bit his skin and his heart pounded in the darkness, was that the decisions made in the next few hours would haunt him forever. But he had no way of knowing that yet. The night before Kunuri, the campfire burned low, giving off only a faint glow against the vast curtain of snow. Mehmet sat with his back against a frozen tree, his hands trembling as he scribbled a few lines into his small notebook. His words were clumsy, the ink freezing on the page, but they carried the weight of everything he dared not say aloud. He wrote about the silence, about the shadows moving beyond the hills, and about the fear that settled into his bones like the cold. He wrote about the faces of his comrades, men who laughed during the day but lay awake at night, staring into nothing, each haunted by the same question: would they survive tomorrow? But what Mehmet didn't realize was that the eyes watching him from the tree line were not his own imagination. But the most shocking part of his night hadn't even begun. A battalion on edge, the Turkish Brigade, had been ordered to hold their position near the town of Kunuri. They were thousands of miles away from home, part of a United Nations force that was now face to face with the unexpected. Waves of Chinese troops who moved like shadows across the mountains. Mehmet's commander paced between the men, his boots crunching on the snow. He whispered orders, his breath visible in the freezing air. The soldiers clutched their rifles tighter, their bodies shaking not only from the cold, but from the anticipation of what was to come. "Stay awake. Stay sharp," the commander muttered, though his own voice carried doubt. At that moment, Mehmet felt the weight of something more than just fear. It was responsibility, the knowledge that his comrades depended on him, that one mistake could mean the end. Still, he had no idea of the betrayal buried deep in the shadows of their ranks. But the real enemy was not only outside their camp. Whispers in the dark. The night grew colder, the silence sharper. Mehmet thought he heard whispers. At first only the wind through the trees, but then something more deliberate. He raised his rifle, squinting into the darkness. Nothing, only snow. Only shadows. He lowered his weapon, but the unease stayed. The whispers might have been in his mind, but the journal he kept did not lie. In careful handwriting he marked the moment. There is something out there waiting for us. I can feel it, but what Mehmet couldn't yet understand was that the sound he heard was not just the enemy preparing to strike. It was the first thread of a secret that tied one of his own comrades to a past betrayal. A betrayal that, if revealed, could tear the brigade apart. The last hours of peace as dawn crept closer, Mehmet's thoughts wandered home. He pictured the narrow streets of his village, the sound of his mother's voice calling him for supper, the laughter of his younger brother running barefoot across the yard. For a fleeting moment, warmth touched his frozen heart. He wanted to believe he would see them again. He wanted to believe that this war, this nightmare, would end. But deep down he knew. Wars did not end easily, and men like him were often swallowed by them. He looked around at his comrades, some asleep against their rifles, for their weapons. Mehmet's journal fell from his coat pocket, its pages fluttering open in the snow like a desperate cry to the heavens. The first shots rang out, echoing through the frozen valley. The stillness was shattered, replaced by chaos. Mehmet pressed himself against the earth, the roar of gunfire drowning out his own thoughts. He thought he was prepared. He thought he understood fear. But the truth was, nothing could prepare him for what was about to unfold, because in the next moments, Mehmet would face not only the enemy charging from the hills, but also the shocking revelation that someone within their own ranks had been keeping a secret that could cost them everything. The ground shook as explosions lit the horizon, snow and soil flying into the air. Mehmet gripped his rifle with trembling hands, his breath shallow. He turned to shout to the soldier beside him, only to realize the man was gone. And when he finally saw where that soldier had gone, the truth made his blood run colder than the Korean winter itself. Chaos at dawn. The first minutes after the flare exploded in the sky were pure madness. Gunfire rattled through the valley, each shot cutting into the silence of the night like a blade. The snow, once white and pure, became a canvas of smoke and blood. Mehmet Kara pressed himself into the icy ground, his breath shallow, his eyes darting to the ridges where shadows poured down like a black tide. Chinese soldiers, wave after wave, surged forward with terrifying resolve. Their shouts mixed with the cries of Mehmet's comrades as bullets tore through the air. He tried to steady his rifle. Their disappearance in the frenzy, Mehmet turned to check on the soldier who had been beside him only moments ago. The spot was empty. Panic shot through him. Where had he gone? He scanned the snow, crawling through gunfire until he caught sight of a trail of footprints leading away from their defensive line. At first he thought the man had fallen back in fear. But the footprints didn't head towards safety. They went around the flank, straight toward a nearby ridge that was dangerously exposed. Mehmet's heart sank. Why would anyone abandon their position to move toward the enemy? It was reckless. It was madness unless it wasn't. But if the truth about that soldier's intentions came out, it could destroy the brigade from within. Holding the line, the commander's voice roared above the chaos. "Hold your fire steady! Don't waste bullets!" The men obeyed, though fear etched every face. Mehmet's friend Ali shouted over the noise, "They keep coming. We can't hold them forever." Mehmet fired again, the recoil slamming into his shoulder. He felt the sting of powder burn on his skin, the acrid smoke filling his lungs. Every second stretched like an eternity. Inside, he wrestled with the fear clawing at his mind. What if Ali is right? What if we're already lost? What if no one back home even remembers us? But then he forced himself to remember his family, his mother's voice, his younger brother's laughter. That memory gave him the strength to keep firing, to keep living, at least for another moment. Yet even as he fought, he knew something was wrong. The enemy pressed too hard, too fast, as if they knew exactly where the weak points in their defense were. The whisper of betrayal. Later, amid the roar of the battle, Mehmet caught sight of the missing soldier again. He was crouched behind a boulder, well outside the defensive line. His rifle wasn't raised. He wasn't firing. Instead, he appeared to be signaling, gesturing with his arm, flashing something toward the enemy lines. Mehmet's stomach twisted. No, it couldn't be. Not one of their own. He wanted to scream, to point, to tell the commander, but the sound stuck in his throat. If he accused the man and was wrong, he'd ruin an innocent soldier's life. If he stayed silent and the man truly was betraying them, the entire brigade could be slaughtered. But in war, silence can be deadlier than any bullet. A soldier's resolve, the enemy charged again, closer this time. Mehmet dropped his journal into the snow and clutched his rifle like a lifeline. He ran forward a few steps, firing into the shadows, his body moving faster than his fear. "Mehmet down!" Ali screamed, pulling him back just as a grenade exploded nearby. The shockwave lifted him off the ground, snow and dirt pelting his face. His ears rang, his vision blurred, but he forced himself to stand. He thought of his journal, those fragile words scrawled in the dark. Would anyone ever read them if he died here? Would they understand the truth of this night, or would it vanish like smoke? No, he had to survive. He had to tell the story. The weight of choice as the battle raged. Mehmet found himself with a choice more terrifying than the bullets flying around him. He could reveal what he had seen, that one of their own was signaling the enemy. But doing so without proof could divide the unit at the worst possible moment. If he stayed silent, the man might betray them again, costing dozens of lives. If he spoke, he risked being dismissed as paranoid or worse, branded a coward spreading fear. Both paths led to disaster, but in war, every choice narrows the road to survival. The dying soldier amid the chaos. Mehmet stumbled upon another comrade, a young soldier bleeding heavily in the snow. His eyes were wide with terror, his lips trembling. Tell them I fought," the soldier whispered, clutching at Mehmet's arm. His words came in broken gasps. "Don't let them forget me." Mehmet knelt, his throat tight. He wanted to promise, but his voice cracked. He nodded instead, squeezing the dying man's hand. In that moment, Mehmet felt the crushing weight of his own mortality. If he died here, would anyone carry his story? Would anyone even know the truth? The snow swallowed the soldier's last breath. Mehmet stood, his rifle trembling, his heart colder than the wind. The encirclement. The sun rose slowly, revealing the full horror of the battlefield. Smoke curled from the ridges, bodies lay scattered in the snow, and the enemy kept coming, relentless, endless. The brigade was being surrounded. The realization struck like ice. They were not fighting to win anymore. They were fighting to survive, to delay the inevitable, to buy time for others. Mehmet clenched his teeth, whispering under his breath, "If this is my last day, let them remember how we stood." But even as he spoke, his eyes flicked again to the soldier on the ridge. The man's gestures grew clearer now, his movements unmistakable. He was no longer just a soldier. He was the shadow in their ranks, the hidden enemy. As Mehmet raised his rifle, torn between shooting the enemy before him or the comrade betraying them from behind, the commander shouted his name, "Mehmet! Now take the shot!" But the commander wasn't pointing at the charging enemy. He was pointing directly at the man on the ridge, their own soldier. Mehmet froze, his finger on the trigger. In that frozen second, the weight of loyalty, trust, and survival crashed down on him. And the choice he made in that moment would decide not only his fate, but the fate of the entire brigade. Between trust and betrayal, Mehmet's rifle felt heavier than ever. The barrel shook as he aimed, his finger tightening against the trigger. He could hear his commander's voice echoing, "Take the shot." But his heart screamed in protest. Could he really kill one of his own? The man on the ridge stood exposed, his silhouette clear against the pale sky. His arm flashed again, signaling into the distance. Mehmet's stomach churned. The evidence was undeniable now. This wasn't panic or retreat, it was betrayal, yet doubt clung to him like frost. What if I'm wrong? What if he's trying to warn us, not betray us? If I fire, I might be killing an innocent man. But the truth was far darker than anything Mehmet could imagine. A split second. The Chinese assault pressed harder, bullets cutting through the snow like knives. Mehmet could feel death closing in from both sides. His comrades screamed, firing wildly, scrambling to hold the line, and there he was, frozen between two enemies, the swarm charging from the hills and the traitor within. Ali shouted beside him, "Mehmet, do it! He's giving them our position." The world narrowed to a single heartbeat. Mehmet squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked through the chaos. The man on the ridge jerked back, his arms flailing before he collapsed into the snow. Silence clung to Mehmet's chest for a brief second, followed immediately by a surge of gunfire from the enemy. Had he saved his comrades or sealed their doom? The enemy advances. The answer came almost immediately. The enemy surged forward, charging with renewed fury, as if that single shot had been a signal. Mehmet's heart sank. The betrayal had already taken root. The man he shot had not been alone. He had been part of something bigger. Rehook number 2. And killing him was only the beginning of a darker revelation. Grenades burst around them, snow and smoke consuming the trenches. Mehmet and Ali ducked, coughing, their ears ringing. Through the haze, Mehmet caught glimpses of enemy silhouettes swarming the battlefield. He fought like a machine, his body moving on instinct. Fire, reload, duck, fire again. But his mind was spiraling. Did I kill a traitor or a brother? The weight of conscience amid the chaos. Mehmet found his journal buried in the snow. The pages were smeared with dirt and ash, but it was still there, his fragile connection to sanity. He clutched it against his chest for a moment before shoving it back into his coat. He thought, if I live, I'll write the truth. If I die, let this journal tell my story. But another thought haunted him, darker than death itself. What if the truth is that I killed the wrong man? His hands trembled as he fired again. Each shot felt heavier than the last. The commander's doubt later. During a brief lull in the assault, the commander approached Mehmet. His face was stern, but his eyes betrayed something else. Uncertainty. You took the shot, the commander said. You did what had to be done. But Mehmet heard the hesitation in his voice. The commander wasn't fully convinced. Doubt spread through the ranks like wildfire. Some soldiers whispered that Mehmet had saved them. Others whispered he had murdered one of their own without proof. Mehmet wanted to defend himself, to shout the truth, but his voice failed him. He knew words would change nothing, and the doubt among his comrades would soon be deadlier than the bullets outside. The encirclement tightens by midday. The brigade was nearly surrounded. Enemy forces cut off the main road, and communication with the rear was collapsing. Every path of escape narrowed, the noose tightening with each hour. The soldiers were exhausted, freezing, and terrified. Supplies were running low, ammunition dwindling. Ali leaned close to Mehmet, whispering, "We can't hold out much longer." "We'll have to retreat," Mehmet shook his head. "Retreat to where?" "They're everywhere." He looked around at the faces of the men, boys really, each one carrying the weight of despair. He felt it pressing on him, threatening to break him. But surrender was never an option, because what awaited them beyond the hills was worse than death itself. The dying light, as the sun began to set, the battlefield turned into a nightmare. Flames flickered across the snow, painting everything in shades of orange and red. The cries of the wounded filled the air, echoing through the valley like ghosts. Mehmet dragged Ali behind a broken wall, both of them gasping for breath. "We can't stop," Mehmet muttered. "If we stop, we die." Ali's face was pale, his eyes wide. "Then we keep moving. Always forward." Mehmet nodded, though his heart screamed otherwise. Forward into what? Into more death? More betrayal? But there was no choice. A hidden letter. That night, during a moment of silence between attacks, Mehmet rifled through the pockets of the dead soldier, the one he had shot. He expected nothing more than spare bullets or a photograph. Instead, he found a folded letter, stained with blood. The words were faint but clear. A letter written not to family but to someone unnamed. Someone giving instructions, detailing positions, describing vulnerabilities. It was proof. The soldier had been a traitor, but at the bottom of the page was a line that made Mehmet's blood run cold. "Others are among them, waiting." And suddenly Mehmet realized the betrayal was not over. It was only beginning. Fear in the ranks, the revelation twisted Mehmet's stomach. If there were others, then no one could be trusted. Every glance, every whispered word among the men felt poisoned. He clutched the letter in his fist, unsure whether to reveal it or keep it hidden. If he showed it, paranoia would spread and tear the brigade apart. If he concealed it, more men might die at the hands of unseen traitors. It was another impossible choice, and in war, impossible choices always come with a price. The night deepened, and with it, the silence before the next storm. Mehmet sat against a ruined wall, the letter in one hand, his journal in the other. He thought of home, of his brother's laughter, of his mother's voice. He thought of the men around him, their trust fragile as glass. Then in the distance, a single shot rang out, not from the enemy lines, but from within their own. A soldier fell. Mehmet froze, the truth sinking in. The hidden traitors had struck again, and this time no one would escape suspicion. The shot from within. The sound of the gunshot echoed across the frozen battlefield, louder than the cannons, louder than the cries of the wounded. Every soldier turned, their rifles raised, eyes scanning not the hills but each other. A man had fallen, one of their own, struck down not by the enemy but by betrayal. Fear rippled through the brigade like lightning. Mehmet's pulse thundered in his ears. The letter in his pocket suddenly weighed more than his rifle. He looked into the faces of his comrades and saw what he dreaded most: suspicion. Every pair of eyes darted with doubt. Trust was gone. But the worst part was yet to come. The traitor was still among them. The commander's ultimatum. The commander barked orders, his voice cracking under strain. "Everyone hold your positions. No more mistakes." But his own hands shook, his authority slipping with every second. He pulled Mehmet aside. "You saw something, didn't you? Tell me now." Mehmet hesitated. Should he reveal the blood-stained letter? If he did, panic would spread, and the fragile line they held would collapse. If he kept silent, the hidden traitor would strike again, and the choice Mehmet made would either save them or destroy them. The relentless assault as the argument simmered, the enemy struck again. Mortars rained down, tearing apart the frozen ground. Mehmet and Ali dove for cover as shrapnel ripped through the air. "Move!" Ali shouted. "We're surrounded." They scrambled across the snow, bullets snapping past their heads. Mehmet's lungs burned, his legs heavy, but he pushed forward. "Run, fall, get up. Keep going." Each step was a battle. Each breath was survival. The letter revealed. Finally, when the chaos subsided, Mehmet could bear it no longer. He pulled the crumpled letter from his pocket and handed it to the commander. The man's eyes widened as he read. His face turned pale. "There are others," he whispered. It wasn't just him. The soldiers nearby overheard, and murmurs spread like wildfire. Fingers pointed, voices rose. Fear turned brother against brother. Mehmet's chest ached. He wanted to shout above the noise, "Stop! We are still alive because of each other." But his voice was lost in the storm of accusations. A brother's plea. Ali grabbed Mehmet's arm, pulling him aside. His eyes were desperate. "Mehmet, listen. Forget the letter. Forget the traitors. Right now all that matters is survival. We can't fight them and ourselves at the same time." Mehmet looked at him, torn. Ali was right. But his conscience screamed that silence was dangerous, because every second they wasted fighting each other brought the enemy closer. The last stand as night fell. The brigade realized the truth. Retreat was their only chance. The enemy had cut off every road but one. A narrow mountain passed through the freezing dark. The commander ordered them to move. "We leave at once." No hesitation. Mehmet gripped his rifle and followed the column into the night. The snow bit at his face, the wind howling like 1,000 voices. Each man stumbled forward, exhausted and broken. Behind them the battlefield burned. Ahead of them only uncertainty waited, the final choice. Halfway through the pass, Mehmet heard it again, the faint whistle, the signal he had seen before. He turned and saw another soldier, one he had fought beside for weeks, raising his arm toward the darkness. Betrayal, again. Rage and despair clashed inside him. He could shoot. He could stop it. But the thought of killing another comrade nearly tore him apart. Ali hissed, "Do it, Mehmet, or we all die." Time slowed. Mehmet's finger rested on the trigger. His heart pounded. His breath came in gasps. He remembered the dying soldier's words. "Tell them I fought. Don't let them forget me." And he realized in that instant that survival was not just about living. It was about truth, fire, and silence. The shot rang out. The betrayer crumpled into the snow, his signal silenced forever. The column pressed on, shaken but alive. But Mehmet felt no triumph, only emptiness. Each step forward was heavier than the last. He had done what was necessary, yet it felt like his soul had been carved away. Still, he clutched his journal to his chest. The story had to be told, not just of battles and victories, but of betrayal, of sacrifice, of brothers lost in the frozen hills of Korea. Because sometimes survival means carrying the weight of the truth alone. The soldiers' journal days later, when the brigade finally linked with Allied forces, they were battered, starving, and broken. They had survived, but the cost was immeasurable. Mehmet sat by a dying fire, opening his journal once more. His hands trembled as he wrote, the ink smudging against the cold pages. He wrote of fear. He wrote of courage. He wrote of betrayal. And at the end he wrote one line that echoed through the silence of his heart. "We fought, we bled, we endured. Do not forget us." The war would rage on, battles would be fought, and stories would be buried. But Mehmet's words, hidden in that worn notebook, would one day resurface. And when they did, the truth would shock everyone who thought they already knew the story of the forgotten war. Because everyone believed they had heard the whole story, but the greatest secret had yet to be revealed. If this story moved you, don't let it vanish into silence. Subscribe to the Soldier's Journal and join us as we uncover more forgotten voices of the Korean War. Like this video to keep these memories alive, and share it so others can hear the truth. Because history is not just dates and battles, it's human lives, and their stories must be told.